At the beginning of October, I had this plan. I'm going to read a bunch of scary books. I even checked out of the library The Graveyard Shift by Stephen King, which is a collection of the short stories. And so I thought, I'm going to have this theme just all month long. I'm going to read scary stuff. And it just didn't happen that way. I spent a lot of my time this past month finishing up a workbook that I was putting on KDP, which is Amazon's print-on-demand service. And so that took up a lot of my time. And then when I wasn't doing that, I found myself just reaching for other types of books, like more nonfiction. So the first one I read, and this one really was a fun book to read, was The Spirit-Controlled Temperament by Tim LaHaye. And so you might know his work. He's like a Christian author. I think he helped write the Left Behind series, which theologically I would have problems with. But this book was really good. It is all about your personality and how, I mean, he kind of like draws out these different personality types. And then he says that, you know, like, oh, these are some examples from the Bible of, you know, people that have this kind of temperament. And it's interesting because, you know, there are, I love personality quizzes and things like that. And I think they're interesting. Even though there are a lot of different types of personality divisions, you know, like there's like the big 5 personality traits and that kind of a thing. I like to take those tests and see, you know, like what those tests say, because what I have found is, generally speaking, they're on to something. Maybe no particular one is exactly right, but it usually helps me understand myself better. And it usually helps me understand other people better. I know in the past, I used to kind of think, well, everybody's just like me. And so if I feel this way about something, then of course everyone feels that way about it. But now I understand that no, there are people who, you know, they have a more optimistic take on things. And there are some people who get sadder easier. And some people are more, you know, angry or have this kind of like aggressive kind of personality, and that's just how they are. And so this book does a great job of, you know, pointing out, you know, how you probably are wired, but then also pointing out how, you know, if taken to an extreme, if you don't kind of learn how to get those things under control, it can be bad for you, spiritually speaking, which I do agree with. For those of you who are interested, I'm a Mel Flegg. And it was funny because when I was reading through the book, I kind of thought there were a couple of different ones that I thought I might be. But I asked my husband and the rest of my family to pick what they thought I was. And yeah, I was definitely a Mel Flegg. It was unanimous. So he breaks it down into 4 different temperaments: sanguine, choleric, melancholy, and phlegmatic. And so then from that, he says that there are 12 basic personality types, because, you know, you gotta match all those up in various ways. And so we had a good time just, you know, reading through those different types and, you know, trying to figure out with our kids, you know, which type are they? And it was a good little exercise, because I think it helped us to understand each other a little bit better. The next book I read was The Curmudgeon's Guide to Getting Ahead by Charles Murray. Now, that was a book that someone lent to my son. And so since my son was reading it and he's 18, I decided, you know, I want to read it because I like to read what my kids are reading. Especially this was an advice book. And so I thought, well, I would like to know, like, is this good advice or do I disagree with any of it? So this book was kind of interesting to me because overall I thought it gave good advice, but a lot of it was focused on writing, or it seemed like a big portion of the book was, which makes sense because the book is about, you know, how to get ahead, and it's about clear communication, and writing is an important part of that. There wasn't a whole lot I just outright disagreed with. It wasn't necessarily a book that I found super helpful to myself. I had read a lot of the advice or just kind of grown up with that advice. Although I do see that these days it's probably not a message a lot of people get. It's just, you know, a lot of traditional kind of advice, like, you know, stand up straight, you know, respect your elders, you know, dress appropriately for work, which again, you know, I feel like that used to be a thing that you just kind of knew. But these days, I suppose, is not so common. The next book I finished was the Bible. So every year I read 4 chapters a day, and I read 1 chapter in the Gospels every day also. So I'm reading through the Gospels 4 times a year, and I'm reading through the entire Bible at least once a year. So this is my favorite Bible. It's the companion Bible. It's got a lot of footnotes and takes a lot of the words back to the original Greek and Hebrew and Chaldee. But also I use the Orthodox Study Bible too, because there are things, this is just a regular Protestant King James, and I'm an Orthodox Christian, so we have additional scriptures. Overall, it's my favorite book of all time. It gives advice, really great advice for every situation you may find yourself in. And it gives me a lot of peace, and there's beautiful poetry in it. There's just interesting stories too. There's everything from, real violent situations to love triangles to, just everything, really. Everything in the human condition is in that book. The next book I read was a library book by David Goggins. It was called Can't Hurt Me. Now, I did a full video on this book, so I won't go into a lot of depth here, but overall, it was a good book, a lot of language, but it was a good book for those people who, if you're wanting to set goals and you kind of are having a hard time achieving goals because maybe you just give up easily, I'd say that's maybe a good book to read because it'll get you in gear. It'll show you what's possible. I mean, any book that you read by somebody who's really good at setting goals and achieving them can be helpful. This guy is a machine. So lots of language, but overall, good advice, I'd say. The next book was Ray Bradbury's From the Dust Returned. So I love Ray Bradbury. This was not my favorite Ray Bradbury book, however. I felt like it was a little disjointed. Like it just didn't have the same kind of I don't know. No, normally I just I can't put it down. And this one I found myself putting down. This did start out as a collection of short stories, and he just kind of put it all together and made it into a novel. And I feel like it would have been better if it was just the short stories. There were parts where I kind of got confused about what was the story exactly. But also though, there are parts where his writing is it's so poetic. In fact, that was one thing about it it was beautiful, but also it made it hard to read sometimes. It was almost poetry in the form of prose. And I got lost sometimes. And so it was almost I wish it would have been maybe either more of a book of poetry or more just prose and a novel. That would just be my own opinion. Of course, he's a way better writer than I am, so what do I know? And the last book I finished was Just So Stories by Rudyard Kipling. So I love Rudyard Kipling. My favorite by him is Captain's Courageous, but this book is made up of stories that Rudyard Kipling told his own children when they were growing up. And they were delightful, they just were. This was not necessarily my favorite book ever, but the stories were they were cute. They were. I could imagine him telling them to his kids. The writing style is very conversational. He calls the reader, best beloved. And there are a lot of little, things that you could tell, like little struggles he would have with his kids. And so he would put that into the story. And I liked the book. And as I was reading it, the one thing that I kept thinking was this would be a really good book to read aloud to my kids. And I think I would have enjoyed it even more if I had read it out loud to my kids. But my kids, are 12 and up. So I mean, my 12-year-old actually might have liked me to read it to him. He may still. But it is, I would say, if you've got younger kids, this would be kind of a fun read aloud. Another really cool thing about this book is it's also illustrated by Rudyard Kipling. And so, which I really like because I like to draw and I like to write. And so a lot of times I feel kind of torn between those two, which one do I practice? But he's an excellent illustrator, and the illustration, there's one for every story at least. So a lot of times multiple illustrations, and it's just kind of an interesting work of art plus I like it. The more I'm sitting here talking about it, the better I'm liking it. So that was all for the month of October. It was more of a sane kind of reading month for me. I have several more that I did start in the month, but I haven't finished yet. So that'll be for next month, hopefully. And at this point, I'm actually slightly ahead on my reading goal. Hopefully I'll be able to get even more ahead because I know how busy the end of the year gets with holidays and everything. But also I'm trying to finish a book that I'm writing about eating one meal a day. So I don't know, like there's going to be some challenges there. I'm also going to be trying to record an audiobook. So it's going to be a lot of work to try to balance with my reading. So we'll see. So if you have recommendations for books that you maybe read or are currently reading, be sure to leave it in the comments below. And if you'd like to see more of these types of videos, be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching. Allie McGee comes home from school one day to find that her little brother Pete is gone. She remembers the imaginative stories he told about a magical tree in the forsaken forest, and she immediately sets out into the woods behind her house to find him. She begins to realize his stories were true when she finds the enchanted tree and is transported to a different world, only to discover that Pete's been kidnapped by the wicked King Olshek. She must go on a dangerous journey to the land of Hinnom to get to the castle where her brother is being held captive. Will Allie be able to save her brother? Or will she too be taken prisoner in Olshek's castle?